What would you do if you were left behind while everyone else went on vacation, and the truth of why you were left behind hit you like a ton of bricks? I stood there, alone in the doorway of my empty house, staring at the suitcases stacked up by the door, wondering how it could have happened. How could my parents leave without me? They didn't even have the decency to tell me. Instead, they told me they were going to visit family for a week. Just the three of them. And I stayed behind alone. The door slammed behind me as I stepped back into the quiet house. The kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. My family had left that morning, and it was now late afternoon. The quiet was so thick, it felt like it could swallow me whole. I tried to tell myself it was no big deal. Everyone needs their space. Maybe it was just a small getaway they wanted to take without me. But the more I thought about it, the worse it felt. This wasn't just a casual thing. Something was off, and I could feel it crawling under my skin. I wasn't an idiot. I knew something wasn't right. The question was, why? I paced around the house, my footsteps echoing in the hollow rooms. The place that once felt like home now felt like a prison. I tried to distract myself. Watched some TV, scrolled mindlessly through Instagram, but the images of my family's vacation filled the screen. They were in some tropical paradise, a place I had never been without me. I couldn't even remember the last time we all took a vacation together. This was different. I grabbed my phone, and like some kind of twisted reflex, I checked the messages. Have fun. Don't do anything I wouldn't do, Dad's message read, the words casual and dismissive. My mom had sent a picture of her and Ethan smiling at the airport, a massive banner reading "Welcome to the Bahamas" behind them. Ethan, my annoying little brother, was holding up a sign that said, "I'm not missing you, Chloe." He probably didn't even realize how much that stung. I didn't even get a goodbye from him. A pang of frustration stabbed through me, sharper than anything I'd felt all day. Why wasn't I invited? This wasn't just about missing out on some family trip. This was deeper. They had made a choice, and the sting of their decision was starting to fester. What was so wrong with me that I wasn't even worth the effort of having me there? I glanced at the clock. They were halfway across the country by now, probably sipping drinks with little umbrellas in them, while I was stuck at home. Alone. I hated the idea of being left out, but this wasn't just about the vacation. It was about something bigger, something deeper. But what? As I sat down on the couch, my eyes wandered over to the empty chair where my dad usually sat. Was this what it felt like? The calm before the storm? I grabbed my laptop and opened up Facebook. It's stupid, I know, but it's easier to vent online when you don't have anyone else to talk to. I scrolled through posts of friends and people I barely knew, all sharing their summer plans. It made my isolation feel even more suffocating. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? That comment. It was from some random YouTube channel I subscribed to, and for some reason, the phrase "new beginning" stuck with me. My mind went wild. Maybe this was the beginning of something bigger than what I could understand. But why couldn't they just tell me the truth? The whole situation felt off. And the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that they were hiding something from me. I slammed my laptop shut, the screen flickering off. Enough of this. I had to know what was going on. I wasn't just going to sit here, wallowing in this stupid emptiness, letting it eat me alive. I was done with that. I was going to find out what they were keeping from me. The sound of the front door creaked. I froze, heart pounding, every muscle tensing. I turned to see Ms. Evelyn, the neighbor, standing in the doorway. She was the kind of person who always seemed to know everything, from the weather to the most obscure details about our family. My mom's best friend for years. "I heard the car leave this morning," she said, her voice soft but sharp with curiosity. "Is everything all right, Chloe? Your parents didn't mention anything about a trip." I don't know," I mumbled, suddenly feeling exposed. It wasn't like I'd told anyone how much it hurt that they'd left me behind. "I guess they forgot to mention it." She raised an eyebrow, and there was something in her eyes that made me uneasy. Forgot, huh? She murmured, more to herself than to me. Well, it's a funny thing. Family secrets. Sometimes they're more complicated than we think. What? I stared at her, my heart skipping a beat. The strange, knowing tone in her voice didn't sit right with me. Family secrets? What was she talking about? She smiled gently, but it wasn't the kind of smile that reassured me. It was knowing, like she knew something I didn't. And in that moment, I realized I was not as alone as I thought. There was something about to unfold that would change everything I thought I knew about my family. Before I could say anything, Ms. Evelyn gave me a pat on the shoulder and walked away, leaving me with a million questions I had no answers to. I stood there for a moment, my mind spinning. What did she mean by family secrets? I knew I couldn't leave it at that. I had to get to the bottom of this. Something was wrong, and I would find out what it was, even if it meant digging into places I wasn't sure I wanted to go. As I grabbed my jacket and headed for the stairs, a thought crossed my mind. Maybe this vacation wasn't just a trip. Maybe it was the beginning of something else. Something that I was never meant to know. And that thought terrified me, because now I couldn't unknow it. The answers were out there, hidden somewhere in the secrets of my family. And I was going to find them. I hadn't noticed before, but now the house felt different. It wasn't just the silence, though that was certainly part of it. It was the absence of them, the absence of my family. For as long as I could remember, this house had been a warm place. It was where I'd learned to laugh, to fight, and to love. But now it felt hollow. I sank down onto the couch again, my fingers absently tracing the edge of the cushion. This was supposed to be my home, my sanctuary. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was never really mine. Not in the way I thought it was. Not in the way I needed it to be. I guess I've always been a bit different from my family. Not in any big way, just enough. Enough that I never felt quite at home, even within my own walls. Take my parents, for example. They're the kind of people who are always organized, always on time, always in control. My dad, Dan, is the one who plans every vacation down to the last minute, and Mom, Maria, is the social one, the glue that holds everything together. They're the type of people who smile politely at parties, make small talk effortlessly, and never let on if something's wrong. And then there's me. I've never really fit into that mold. I'm the dreamer, the one who spends more time with my nose buried in a book than in the real world. The one who gets lost in my head when I should be paying attention. I'm the girl who daydreams about leaving this sleepy suburban town and going somewhere bigger, somewhere exciting where I can finally feel like I belong. Maybe that's why I'd always been a little bit of an outsider in my own family. I wasn't like them. I wasn't as social, as together, or as driven to maintain appearances. I never understood why everything had to be so perfect all the time. There was always this undercurrent of pressure in our house to present a flawless image to the world. It was exhausting. It wasn't that I didn't love them or that they didn't love me. I knew they did in their own way. But love, at least in our family, always felt a little strained. Like we were all actors playing roles, each of us trying to fit into the script that was handed down to us when we were little. I wasn't quite sure if my parents even knew who I really was. I don't think they ever really took the time to ask. Ethan, my younger brother, was a whole different story. He was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. 10 years old, full of energy, laughter, and smiles. He was charming, the kind of kid who made friends easily, who knew exactly what to say to make people like him. I don't think my parents even realized how different we were, how much of a divide there was between me and Ethan. Maybe that's why they hadn't even hesitated to take him with them on their vacation. He was the easy choice, the one who didn't make things complicated. He was the son who would blend right in, who would love every second of the trip, and who would be grateful for the chance to spend time with Mom and Dad. Me? I was the one who would question everything. I was the one who might say something awkward or do something that didn't fit. I was the one who'd get left behind. It wasn't the first time it had happened, either. No, this was just the latest in a long line of moments where I found myself on the outside looking in. Every family event, every holiday, every birthday, Ethan would get the attention. Ethan would get the praise. Ethan was the easy one, the lovable one, the one who made everything seem normal. And I? Well, I was just the odd one out. The more I thought about it, the more it hurt. I don't know why I was so surprised by their decision to leave me behind this time. I'd always been the one to sit on the sidelines, watching as they all went off and did their thing without me. It's just that this time, it stung more than usual. I could hear their voices in my head, their reasons for excluding me. We didn't think you'd enjoy the trip. You've been so busy lately. We didn't want to bother you. It'll be nice to have some time with just us. And I believed them. But I also knew that deep down, there was more to it. Something deeper that they weren't saying. I started thinking about the past. Maybe I had always been a little more difficult to understand. I was never the go-with-the-flow type like Ethan. I questioned everything. I didn't just accept things the way they were. I challenged them in little ways. Sometimes big ones, like when I refused to participate in their family photos, or when I stormed out of the dinner table when they asked me to help with something that felt meaningless. I was a dreamer, always looking for more than what was in front of me. I was the black sheep, and I knew it. But that didn't mean I wasn't loved. I knew my parents loved me. They just didn't know how to love me in the way I needed. They didn't know how to handle my quirks, my desire for independence, my need for something more than the safe little box they'd built around our family. As I sat there, staring at the empty space where my family had been, I thought about how things had changed over the years. It wasn't just the vacation. It was everything. There was a wall between us now, one that had been slowly built brick by brick, over years of misunderstandings and half-spoken words. That's when it hit me. It wasn't just the vacation that hurt. It was the realization that this wasn't a random occurrence. They hadn't just forgotten to invite me. No, they'd chosen not to include me. And that fact stung deeper than anything else. I needed answers. I couldn't sit here, alone in the house, waiting for them to return and pretend everything was fine. I wasn't just going to let this go. Not when there were things I needed to understand. So I decided I would find the truth. I would figure out why they left me behind, why they had chosen to exclude me from something that, at first, seemed so simple. I didn't care if it meant confronting them with things they didn't want to face. I was going to get to the bottom of it. And maybe, just maybe, I'd finally find the answers I'd been looking for my whole life. The next few days felt like a blur. I tried to distract myself, just as I had before, but nothing could keep the questions from swirling in my mind. I spent my days scrolling through social media, watching my parents' vacation photos appear in real time, as if mocking me. They were having the time of their lives while I sat here, trapped in this suffocating silence. Every time I opened my phone, it felt like a slap in the face. I would see my mom and dad beaming in photos on the beach, their arms around each other, like they had found their perfect paradise. Then there was Ethan, smiling ear to ear as they explored some new, exciting destination. But the more I looked at those photos, the more I started to notice something odd. There were no photos of Ethan and my mom alone. No candid shots of just them. In every single picture, Dad was there. He was either holding the camera or standing right next to them. The whole thing felt rehearsed. I tried to tell myself that I was overthinking it. Maybe my parents just didn't want to leave Ethan alone. Maybe they wanted to make sure we all stayed connected. But the more I analyzed the photos, the more I felt like something wasn't adding up. Why didn't I see the usual family dynamics? Why wasn't there even one picture of just my mom and me, or one of me and Ethan like the ones from previous trips? The cracks were starting to show, and I wasn't sure what to make of them. I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was going on, something I wasn't being told. I wasn't ready to confront anyone about it yet. I couldn't. But that didn't stop me from digging. After all, it wasn't just the vacation that bothered me anymore. It was everything. The next morning, I woke up early, my mind already racing. My parents were still a few days away from returning, and I had time. Time to figure out exactly what was going on. I wasn't going to sit idly by while my family played perfect little games in the sun. I started with the simplest thing I could think of, my parents' phone records. I didn't feel guilty about it. Not really. They had excluded me from something so huge without explanation, so I figured I had the right to figure it out. I wasn't spying. I was gathering information. I snuck into their bedroom while they were still gone, and I found my mom's phone charging on the nightstand. I hesitated for just a second before picking it up. I knew it was risky. If I got caught, it would cause more damage than I could ever undo. But I needed answers. I unlocked the phone without trouble. I had seen my mom type in her password more times than I could count. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction when I opened the messages, but as soon as I started scrolling through them, I felt the walls close in on me. It wasn't just vacation photos or messages about their flights. What I found next made my heart stop. The messages were from a man I didn't recognize. Not someone from our extended family. Someone else entirely. They were all short exchanges, brief, seemingly meaningless. But I could feel the tension mounting as I skimmed through them. There was one message that stuck out like a sore thumb. Everything is in place. The next step is tomorrow. That didn't sound like vacation talk. That didn't sound like something my mom would say to anyone. I could feel the cold sweat beginning to form on the back of my neck. What had she gotten herself into? I immediately closed the phone, a rush of panic surging through me. I couldn't breathe for a moment. I had to make sense of what I had just seen. But the truth was, I had no idea what was going on. And worse, what if I was wrong? What if I was overreacting? My mind raced through 1,000 possibilities. Maybe it was something innocent. Maybe she was working on something, some project I didn't know about. Maybe the messages weren't what they seemed. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. I put the phone back where I found it, taking a few deep breaths to steady myself. I couldn't let myself fall apart over this. Not yet. But I needed more information. One message wasn't enough. It wasn't going to answer the questions swirling in my head. I had to dig deeper. I decided to look through my dad's things. I knew he'd never be as careless as my mom. He had always been meticulous about his stuff. Nothing was ever out of place. But this was different. Something had changed, and I needed to find out what. After searching for nearly an hour through drawers, folders, and papers that seemed totally irrelevant, I stumbled upon something strange. It was a letter. Tucked away in the back of his desk drawer, hidden behind old bills and travel brochures, was a thick envelope. I pulled it out cautiously, unsure of what I might find inside. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a name I didn't recognize, Jonathan Hawk. I stared at the name for a long time, trying to place it. The letter was typed, no personal notes, no context. Just an address, some phone numbers, and a message that sent a chill down my spine. Our plan is in motion. See you soon. That wasn't normal. I didn't know what kind of plan they were talking about, but the words felt ominous. It was starting to hit me. This wasn't just about a vacation. This wasn't just about my parents taking a break. Something else was going on, and I was at the center of it. But what was the plan? What did my parents know that I didn't? And why had they left me behind while all of this was happening? The more I uncovered, the more my suspicions grew. This wasn't just about me being left out. It was something much bigger. And whatever it was, I had no idea how deep it ran. But I was about to find out. The days stretched on, each one blurring into the next. I could no longer focus on anything. Everything seemed meaningless compared to the question that gnawed at me. What was really going on? Why had my family left me behind, and what was this strange web of messages, letters, and secrecy? I couldn't stay in this house much longer. I felt like a prisoner, trapped in a home full of unanswered questions, while my family roamed free, as if nothing was wrong. But I couldn't let it go. Not anymore. I needed to find out everything, and I needed to do it quickly. The next morning, after another sleepless night spent pacing and overthinking, I made up my mind. I couldn't keep living in the dark. I needed answers, and there was only one person who could give them to me: Jonathan Hawk. The name haunted me. I hadn't recognized it at first, but it felt important, too important for me to ignore. I ran a quick search on my phone, scanning through the results, hoping something would jump out at me. My heart raced as I clicked on the first link that seemed relevant. Jonathan Hawk, a businessman, a philanthropist, and, according to one of the articles I found, a former associate of my father's. I had no idea why my dad would be in contact with someone like this. Jonathan Hawk's name didn't ring any bells, but I could feel the weight of the connection, even if I didn't understand it yet. I scrolled through the article and found an address, a building in the city that Hawk seemed to frequent. It was just a few hours away. I didn't have much time, but I had to take a chance. I couldn't sit here anymore, hoping someone would just tell me what was going on. It was time to confront it. I grabbed my jacket, the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I couldn't think about the consequences right now. I had no choice but to act. The drive to the city was long, but the closer I got to that building, the more my nerves built up. Every inch of the road felt like I was walking deeper into the unknown, and the fear of what I might find clawed at me. But I had to see this through. I had to get answers. When I finally arrived, I parked a few blocks away, my hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. The building wasn't anything special, a nondescript office tower. No signs, no flashy business advertisements. But there was something about it that felt off. I couldn't explain it. It was like I was stepping into a world that wasn't meant for me. I stood outside for a moment, trying to steady my breathing, wondering if this was a mistake. But there was no going back now. I had to keep moving forward. I walked into the building, my footsteps echoing against the sterile tile floor. The receptionist at the front desk barely looked up as I approached. I gave her a polite smile, my heart pounding in my chest. "I'm here to see Jonathan Hawk," I said, trying to sound confident. She gave me a half-hearted glance. "Do you have an appointment?" I shook my head, feeling the knot in my stomach tighten. "No. I just need to talk to him. It's important." The receptionist hesitated, then reached for the phone. "I'm afraid I can't just let anyone through," she said flatly, dialing a number. "I'll need to confirm with his office." I waited anxiously, my fingers tapping against the counter. A few moments later, she hung up and gave me a forced smile. "He's not available at the moment. Perhaps you'd like to leave a message." I swallowed my frustration. "No. I need to speak to him in person." I'll wait." The receptionist nodded but didn't argue further. I was getting nowhere, but I wasn't ready to give up just yet. I took a seat in the waiting area, my eyes scanning the sterile surroundings. Every second that passed only made me more anxious. What was I even hoping to find here? What if Jonathan Hawk had nothing to do with my parents? What if this was all just a coincidence? And yet, deep down, I knew it wasn't a coincidence. There was something more going on, something I hadn't even begun to understand. I didn't know how much time had passed, but suddenly, the door behind the receptionist opened. A man in his mid-40s stepped out, a sharp-dressed, confident figure with piercing blue eyes. It was Jonathan Hawk, and he was walking straight toward me. For a moment, we just stared at each other. There was no mistaking it. This was the man from the letter, the one my parents had been in contact with. And now, here he was, standing before me. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice smooth but laced with something cold. I stood up, suddenly feeling more exposed than ever. But I couldn't back down. "Not now. I need to know what's going on. Why my parents are involved with you, and why they've been lying to me," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Jonathan Hawk didn't flinch. He studied me for a moment, as if weighing his options. I could feel the tension thickening in the air. I wasn't sure if he'd laugh in my face or turn me away. But what he said next shocked me to my core. "I think it's time you learned the truth," he said, his eyes narrowing with a look of almost amusement. "Follow me." He turned and began walking toward the elevator, and I had no choice but to follow. The elevator doors slid shut with a soft chime, and I was left standing there, staring at Jonathan Hawk's back as he pressed the button for the top floor. My pulse raced, my mind a whirlwind of confusion, anticipation, and fear. Every instinct told me to turn around, to get out of there before it was too late, but my feet wouldn't move. I had come this far. There was no turning back. The elevator ascended slowly, the soft hum of the machinery filling the silence between us. I watched the numbers above the door click upward, each one adding another beat to the pounding in my chest. My hands were cold and clammy, and I could feel the sharp taste of fear in the back of my throat. Finally, the elevator dinged and the doors slid open. Jonathan stepped out without so much as a glance back, and I followed him into a sleek, modern office. The space was minimalist, but the stark, cold design only made everything feel more wrong. It didn't feel like the office of a businessman. It felt like a place where secrets were hidden. I couldn't shake the sense that I was walking deeper into something that I didn't understand. Jonathan motioned for me to sit, his eyes never leaving mine. I hesitated for just a moment before taking a seat across from him, the chair too soft under me, almost as if it was meant to disorient me. He crossed his arms, leaning back in his chair with an expression that seemed half pity, half amusement. "You must have so many questions," he said, his voice smooth, as if he'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. I nodded, too afraid to speak, too afraid of what he might say. This was it, the moment where the truth was finally going to come out. And somehow I wasn't sure if I was ready for it. But Jonathan didn't wait for me to ask anything. He leaned forward slightly, folding his hands in front of him. "The truth is simple," he said, his voice taking on a colder, more serious tone. "Your parents have been involved in something much bigger than you realize. Something that goes back years. You were never supposed to find out, but it seems you've stumbled onto something you shouldn't have." I swallowed hard. I had no idea what he meant. The pit in my stomach grew, but I couldn't stop myself from asking the question that had been burning in my mind for days. Why did they leave me behind? Why didn't they take me with them on vacation? Why didn't they tell me anything? Jonathan's lips twisted into a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Your parents, they thought they were protecting you. They've been keeping you out of this for your own safety. But now it seems that you're already involved, whether they want you to be or not." I felt a cold shiver run through me. What did he mean by that? What did I have to do with all of this? Jonathan's gaze softened for just a moment, his expression becoming more thoughtful. He seemed to weigh his words carefully, as if deciding how much to reveal. "Your family isn't what you think it is," he continued. "They've been working with us for a long time, Chloe. Your father, especially. This vacation, your parents' absence, it wasn't a break. It wasn't for leisure." He paused, letting the words sink in. "They've been working on a project. A very important project. And it's time for you to understand your role in all of it." I felt my breath catch in my throat. My mind raced, trying to piece together what he was saying. But nothing made sense. My parents, who had always been my anchors in life, were somehow involved in something secret, something dangerous? And now I was involved too? "What do you mean, my role?" I managed to whisper, barely finding my voice. Jonathan studied me for a long moment, as if deciding how much he should reveal. Then, without warning, he slid a folder across the desk toward me. The cover was simple, black with no markings, but I could feel the weight of it. This was the moment. This was what I had been waiting for. "Everything you need to know is in there," he said, his voice cold. "You'll understand why your parents had to do what they did. And you'll understand why you've been kept in the dark. But once you open that folder, there's no going back." I hesitated. My heart raced as I reached for the folder. It was heavier than I expected. I could feel my fingers trembling as I opened it, as if my entire world was about to shift in an instant. Inside, there were papers, documents, photographs, even maps. The words and images blurred together, but I couldn't look away. I couldn't stop myself from digging deeper. The first photograph that caught my eye was a picture of my parents, looking younger, happy, smiling. But standing next to someone I didn't recognize. The man in the photo had a sinister look to him, his smile wide but his eyes cold. I looked at the documents more closely, but they didn't make sense. There were names, codes, dates. Everything was in a language I didn't understand, a language that seemed far beyond my knowledge. But one thing was clear, this was far from a simple family vacation. Jonathan watched me closely, as if studying my every reaction. He didn't say a word, just let me absorb the information. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I looked up at him, my heart racing in my chest. "What is this?" I asked, my voice trembling with both fear and anger. "What does this have to do with me? What am I supposed to do with this?" Jonathan stood up, walking around the desk slowly. His face was hard now, no hint of the cold amusement from earlier. There was only seriousness. "You're more involved than you think," he said. "This isn't just about your parents. It's about you too, Chloe. This is a family legacy, one that's been passed down for generations. And now, it's your turn to take your place." I recoiled instinctively. Family legacy? What was he talking about? This was insane. I wasn't part of some secret society or hidden operation. I wasn't ready for any of this. But Jonathan's next words hit me like a punch to the gut. "You're the key to everything, Chloe. Whether you like it or not, you're already in this. And your parents, your father, have been preparing you for this moment your entire life." The room spun around me, the edges of my vision blurry as if the ground beneath my feet had suddenly given way. Jonathan's words echoed in my ears like a haunting refrain, each one heavier than the last. "You're the key to everything." My breath caught in my throat, the very idea of it suffocating me. I had been trying to piece together the mystery of why my parents had left me behind, but now, in the wake of Jonathan's confession, everything felt like a puzzle I had no hope of solving. A legacy. My family was part of something far greater than I could have ever imagined. And somehow, I, just a 19-year-old college student, was supposed to be the answer to it all. The photographs and documents before me seemed to mock me. My hands hovered over them, trembling. My parents, the people who had always been my safe harbor, had been preparing me for this moment without even telling me. How was that possible? How had they kept something so huge, so dangerous, hidden from me? Jonathan's calm demeanor only made the situation more unsettling. I wanted answers, but every time I opened my mouth, I wasn't sure what I was asking for anymore. What did I even want to know? Why didn't they tell me? What was this legacy? And, most importantly, why me? Jonathan's voice cut through my thoughts. "You're still processing everything, Chloe. I understand, but there's no time to waste." He straightened up, his eyes intense. "The situation is more urgent than you think. Your parents have been involved in this project for years, and now it's your turn to take the lead." I shook my head, trying to make sense of his words. The panic bubbling up inside me was starting to claw its way to the surface, but I fought to keep it down. I couldn't let him see me unraveling. "Not now. I'm not ready for any of this," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "What are you talking about? What is this project?" Jonathan didn't answer right away. He stood silently for a few moments, as if weighing his words carefully. Finally, he took a deep breath and sat back down across from me, leaning forward slightly. "There are people in this world who will do anything for power, control, influence. The kind of power that can change everything: governments, economies, even history itself. Your family's involvement is deeper than you can comprehend right now. But you, Chloe, you've always been part of it. And now the world is waiting for you to step into that role." My mind raced. The pieces didn't fit. I couldn't comprehend what he was saying. Power, control, influence? I had no idea what that meant, but I knew one thing for sure. I had no interest in being part of any secret operation, no matter how important it seemed to him. This is insane, I muttered under my breath. I didn't sign up for any of this. I just want to know what happened to my family. Jonathan's lips curved into a thin smile, but there was no warmth in it. It's already too late for that, Chloe. They've gone into hiding. You're the only one left who can finish what they started. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Gone into hiding? What did that even mean? Had something happened to them? Where were they? Why hadn't they tried to contact me? I jumped to my feet, the flood of emotions overwhelming me. Where are they? Where is my family? What happened to them? I demanded, my voice cracking. Jonathan stood as well, his presence towering over me. There was no softness left in his demeanor. He was businesslike, cold, calculating. And I realized, in that moment, that he had known exactly what I would ask before I even opened my mouth. Your parents are safe, for now, he said, his tone flat. But they're in a dangerous position. The project is at a critical juncture, and they need to remain hidden until it's resolved. But you, his eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something like pity in them. You're the key, Chloe. They've trained you for this moment your whole life. You just don't know it yet. I felt the walls closing in. My mind raced in every direction, desperate to understand what was happening. It was like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, and the only thing waiting for me was an abyss of secrets, danger, and lies. But there was one thing that kept flashing in my mind. My parents. The ones who had raised me. The ones who had taught me everything I knew. And now I had to believe they'd kept me in the dark to protect me? It felt like a betrayal. Jonathan's gaze softened slightly. You don't have to take this on, Chloe. But the choice isn't really yours anymore. This is bigger than all of us. The future depends on your next move. His words hit me like a freight train. The future. My future. Everything I'd ever known, my entire world, was changing in ways I couldn't control. What am I supposed to do? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. How do I even begin to understand all of this? Jonathan took a step closer, his expression unreadable. You'll have to trust me, he said quietly. You won't be alone in this. But you must make a choice. Time is running out. The weight of his words hung in the air like a thick fog. I had no idea what my next step was, or even what stepping forward meant anymore. But one thing was for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. Jonathan turned, signaling for me to follow. Let's go. We don't have much time. As we walked out of the office and into the hall, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was no longer just a bystander in my own life. I was being dragged into something much bigger, something I could never have predicted. And the worst part? I had no idea if I was strong enough to face it. The ride in Jonathan's sleek black car was silent. The windows were tinted so darkly that the world outside felt like a distant, unreal blur. I couldn't focus on the passing buildings, the traffic lights, or the pedestrians that barely flickered in the corner of my eye. My mind was too full, overwhelmed with everything Jonathan had said. Your parents are safe for now. That phrase kept repeating itself in my head like an ominous chant, and I couldn't shake the dread that seemed to follow me in every shadow. What did "for now" mean? Were they in danger? Had they been hiding all this time? And if so, from what? I could still hear Jonathan's voice clearly in my ears, cold and calm. You're the key, Chloe. You don't know it yet, but you'll understand soon enough. Every part of me wanted to deny it. I wanted to scream at him that I wasn't involved in any of this, that I wasn't ready to carry the weight of whatever legacy he kept referring to. But I had no idea what else to do. If I refused to listen, if I ran away, I had no idea what would happen to me, or worse, what would happen to my parents. So I sat there, frozen, gripping the seat as we sped down the streets. There was a tension in the air, thick and suffocating. I could feel it pressing down on my chest. My heart kept racing, as if I was being dragged deeper into something that I didn't understand, and every instinct screamed at me to turn back. But there was no going back now. The car pulled into a narrow alleyway, and Jonathan killed the engine. The car's interior lights flickered off, and I was plunged into darkness, the only sound the distant hum of the city. I looked at him, my throat dry, my breath shallow. He hadn't said anything for the last 10 minutes. I wondered if he even realized how terrifying the silence was. He finally spoke, breaking the quiet. "We're here." I looked out the window and saw an old, industrial-looking building ahead of us. It had a worn-down look to it, like it had once been something important but had long since been abandoned. The metal doors were rusted, the windows cracked. It didn't look like the kind of place anyone would willingly walk into, especially not at night. I felt my stomach twist into knots. Jonathan stepped out of the car and walked toward the entrance without looking back. Hesitation gripped me, but I followed, my feet moving on their own. Every part of me screamed to turn around, but I stayed close behind him. As we approached the building, Jonathan didn't slow down. He pressed a hidden button beside the door, and with a loud mechanical hiss, the door groaned open. The air inside smelled musty and damp, and the only light came from a few dim, flickering bulbs overhead. "Welcome to the heart of it all," Jonathan said, his voice quieter now, almost reverent. I stepped inside, my skin prickling with unease. The building was far larger than I'd expected. The hall stretched out before us, lined with doors on either side. Each one seemed locked, but I knew instinctively that behind those doors were things I wasn't supposed to see, things I wasn't meant to know. The place felt like a maze, like a labyrinth of secrets, and I was its unwilling guest. Jonathan led me down the hallway to the farthest door. He stopped in front of it and pressed another button on the wall. The door slid open, revealing a large room filled with computers, monitors, and strange equipment I didn't recognize. The walls were lined with bookshelves crammed full of old, dusty files. This place was alive with the hum of technology, and yet it felt cold, empty, like a forgotten place of business. "Is this where my parents worked?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound composed. Jonathan nodded, his expression unreadable. "This is where the real work happens, where the decisions are made." I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. "What kind of work?" Jonathan didn't immediately answer. Instead, he walked to one of the computers and began typing rapidly on the keyboard. A screen lit up in front of him, displaying lines of code I couldn't understand. "This," he said, his voice more serious than ever, "is the legacy your family has been a part of. For generations, your parents have been part of a network, an operation, that extends far beyond anything you can imagine. You may have lived your life unaware of it, but it has always been there, in the background." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "A network? An operation?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. The reality of it was starting to sink in, and I hated how it felt. Jonathan turned from the screen and faced me. "This project is about control. It's about shifting the balance of power, Chloe. It's about shaping the future. And you have a crucial part to play." I felt dizzy. The walls of the room seemed to close in around me. I had always thought of my life as ordinary, normal even. I went to school. I had friends. My parents were involved in things I didn't understand, but they kept me safe. They had kept me protected. But now it seemed that everything I thought I knew was a lie. "I don't understand," I said, shaking my head. "Why me? Why do I have to be a part of this?" Jonathan took a deep breath, his gaze softening just a fraction. "Because your parents didn't leave you out of this world to protect you. They left you behind to prepare you. You are the culmination of everything they've worked for." I stepped back, my head spinning. "No," I whispered. "I don't want any part of this. I just want to find my family. I just want to know where they are." Jonathan's face hardened, his eyes narrowing. "You don't have a choice, Chloe. They've already made their decisions for you. You're already in too deep." Before I could respond, a loud noise echoed from behind me, footsteps, fast and purposeful. I spun around to see a man emerging from one of the back rooms, his face masked, his body covered in dark clothing. He was carrying something heavy, a large black bag slung over his shoulder. His presence made the air in the room feel colder, sharper. "Jonathan," the man said curtly, nodding in my direction. "We're ready to begin." The man who had entered the room was tall, imposing, and his presence immediately sent a chill down my spine. His face remained hidden beneath the shadows of his hood, and his movements were smooth, calculated. He seemed completely unaffected by the tension in the air, as if he were accustomed to this kind of environment. I couldn't help but wonder how many others like him existed in this world, how many people were involved in whatever this project was that my parents had been a part of. And now, it seemed, it was my turn to play my role in this shadowy organization. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound confident. Jonathan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned to the man, who nodded in response. Jonathan's cold eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw something that resembled urgency. "His name is Carter. He's a member of the team that's been working with your parents. We've been in the field, gathering information, monitoring threats, making sure that everything goes according to plan," Jonathan said. "But now it's your turn, Chloe. You're the next step in all of this." I shook my head, desperate to cling to the remnants of normalcy. "I don't want to be part of this. I don't want any part of whatever you're doing." My voice cracked, the realization sinking in that there was no way out of this. Whatever was happening now, I was already involved. Carter set the black bag he had been carrying onto one of the nearby tables, unzipping it with precise movements. My heart hammered in my chest as he pulled out a thick folder, one that looked eerily similar to the ones I had seen earlier in Jonathan's office. The contents, when opened, revealed several photographs of my parents, alongside maps and notes I couldn't decipher. Carter glanced at me, his face unreadable, then slid the folder across the table toward me. "Your parents left something for you," he said, his voice low but firm. "Instructions. Information. It's all here. But you'll need to decide if you're ready to understand the full extent of what they've been involved in." I felt a wave of nausea sweep over me. I was being pushed into this, forced to confront the reality of a world I never asked to be a part of. And now, the weight of it was more than I could bear. "Instructions? Information?" I reached out cautiously, my fingers brushing the edge of the folder. It felt like a heavy burden, and I hesitated, afraid of what I might find inside. But as my fingers slid it open, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There were documents detailing covert operations, names of people I didn't recognize, and pictures of places I couldn't even begin to understand. The very concept of what was happening became clearer with every page I turned. My parents had been involved in something dangerous, something that reached far beyond the simple life I had thought we lived. I slammed the folder shut, the sound reverberating in the room. "No, I won't do this," I said, my voice fierce, but my hands were shaking. "I'm not part of this. I don't care what they've left me. I'm done." Jonathan stepped forward, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to my racing heart. "Chloe, you have no idea what you're talking about. Your parents made sacrifices they thought were necessary to protect you. But you need to understand that you don't have the luxury of walking away from this. Not anymore." I felt the weight of his words settle deep within me. There was a finality to them, a sense of inevitability that made my chest tighten. They thought it was necessary to protect me. That's what he said. And yet, all I could think about was how they had kept the secret from me my entire life. How they had lied, hidden the truth, and now they were gone, leaving me to pick up the pieces. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I forced them back. I wouldn't cry in front of them. Not now. I had to be strong, even if it felt like the world was collapsing around me. I swallowed hard, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. I don't even know who I am anymore. This isn't what I signed up for. This isn't my fight. Jonathan's face softened, and for a brief moment, I saw a flicker of sympathy. But it was quickly replaced with something darker. "You don't have a choice," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "The world is changing, Chloe. You're not just a victim here. You've been trained for this. You've been a part of this world your whole life, even if you didn't realize it. The realization hit me like a slap to the face. I had been a part of this world all along. The idea that my life, my entire existence, had been a lie was almost too much to process. But I don't want any part of it, I said again, my voice shaking with the weight of everything I was being forced to accept. Jonathan took a step closer, his eyes dark with intensity. You can't escape it. Not anymore. You're connected to this, Chloe, in ways you don't even understand. Suddenly, a loud crash interrupted the tense silence. The walls seemed to shake, and the overhead lights flickered. Carter immediately sprang into action, his eyes scanning the room. What was that? I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. It's them, Jonathan said urgently. We've been compromised. Get to the back room. Now. Before I could react, Jonathan grabbed my arm and yanked me toward the back of the building. My mind was spinning, but my legs moved on instinct. What was happening? Who was after us? As we rushed down the hallway, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was trapped in a nightmare. A nightmare that only seemed to get darker with each passing second. The sound of rapid footsteps echoed through the hall, growing louder with each passing second. I could hear Jonathan's breathing beside me, quick and shallow, as he yanked me down the corridor toward a small metal door at the far end. Stay close, he hissed, his grip tightening around my wrist as we reached the door. I barely had time to process his words before the door slammed shut behind us, cutting off the dim light from the hallway. The room we were in was pitch black, the only sound the echoing of our quick breaths. What the hell is going on? I demanded, my voice barely above a whisper. Who's after us? Jonathan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he fumbled with something in the dark, the sound of metal scraping against metal, the only indication of what he was doing. After a moment, I heard a soft click, followed by a low hum of machinery starting up. I don't have time to explain, Jonathan said, his tone terse, strained. But we need to move fast. Explain? I repeated, my mind racing. I don't even know what's happening. Who's after us? What do they want? He didn't answer right away. Instead, the room suddenly filled with a faint blue light as the screens around us flickered on. The room was actually some sort of command center. Rows of computers lined the walls, blinking and buzzing with information. The screens displayed all sorts of data, maps, and surveillance footage. It felt like we were at the heart of some kind of secret operation, and the weight of the realization nearly knocked the air out of me. Who are we running from? I repeated, my voice harder this time. Jonathan turned to face me, his eyes dark and serious. The people after us are part of the same network your parents were involved in. But they don't want you. Not anymore. I frowned, trying to piece it all together. Then why? They want something your parents had. Jonathan cut me off, his voice low. Something you have. Something they need to finish their project. And they'll stop at nothing to get it. A cold shiver ran down my spine. What do they want from me? Jonathan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pushed a few buttons on one of the terminals. The screens shifted, displaying various locations, security footage, and coordinates. There's a facility about 30 miles from here, Jonathan said, his voice calm but urgent. I need you to trust me. We have to get there before they do. I was still trying to process everything when Jonathan's words finally sank in. What's there? It's where they're keeping the last piece of the puzzle, he said, looking at me with a strange intensity. It's the only thing that can stop this from spiraling completely out of control. Your parents hid it there, but it was never meant for you to find. You weren't supposed to be involved. But now, we're both trapped in this. I felt the weight of his words crash down on me. The last piece of the puzzle? My mind flashed to the folder Carter had shown me earlier, the documents, the photographs, the maps. What was my family involved in? What had they hidden from me? This sounds insane, I whispered, my voice shaking. Why couldn't they just tell me? Why did they keep this from me? Jonathan's face softened for a brief moment, and he stepped closer. They wanted to protect you. They didn't want you to become a part of this world. But now that you're involved, there's no turning back. The longer we wait, the closer they get to finishing what they started. Who are they? I asked again, desperation creeping into my voice. Who are these people? Why is this happening? Jonathan took a deep breath, and for a moment, I thought he might actually answer me. But before he could speak, the door behind us slammed open. I spun around just in time to see Carter entering the room, his face tight with worry. "They're here," Carter said, his voice urgent. "We need to move. Now." I felt my heart drop into my stomach. Move where? Get to the extraction point. There's no time to explain. They're closing in on us. Jonathan immediately turned to one of the monitors, his fingers flying over the keys. "I'm unlocking the exit route," he muttered under his breath, as the screen flashed with a series of coordinates. Carter didn't wait for further instructions. "We'll cover you," he said, heading for the door. "Just keep moving." I didn't have a choice but to follow. My heart was pounding in my chest as we hurried through the narrow corridors, Jonathan leading the way with Carter behind us. The air was thick with tension, and I couldn't stop the flood of questions in my mind. Who were these people? What did they want? And how was I supposed to stop them? As we reached a large metal door at the end of the hallway, Jonathan paused. He punched a code into the keypad next to the door, and it slid open with a soft hiss. Beyond the door was a sleek black SUV, its engine already running. "This is your ride," Jonathan said, gesturing for me to get in. "We'll explain on the way, but right now we have no time to waste." I hesitated for only a second before climbing into the vehicle, my heart racing. Carter jumped into the driver's seat, while Jonathan slid in next to me. As the SUV sped down the street, I could see shadows moving in the distance, figures lurking just beyond the streetlights, watching our every move. I knew they were closing in on us. The sense of being hunted, of being trapped in this twisted game my parents had left me in, was suffocating. "We're heading to the facility now," Jonathan said, his voice grim. "Once we get there, we'll figure out the rest. But we need to get to the last piece before they do." I glanced at him, trying to keep my composure. "And what if we don't get there in time?" Jonathan's face hardened. "Then everything will change. Forever." The silence that followed was deafening. The hum of the SUV's engine was the only sound filling the tense silence as we sped down the deserted road. The dark sky above us was endless, the faint glimmer of stars barely visible through the haze of clouds. It felt as though the world had become a quiet, ominous place, empty, dark, and full of looming threats I could barely comprehend. We were heading toward the facility, the place where Jonathan said my parents had hidden the last piece of the puzzle. But what puzzle? What had they been working on? What did they know that had led to this whole situation? I glanced at Jonathan, who was staring out of the window, his jaw clenched. His earlier calm demeanor seemed to have been replaced by a quiet urgency. Carter, on the other hand, was driving with a steady focus, his hands gripping the steering wheel, eyes flicking between the road and the rearview mirror. "We're almost there," Jonathan said after a long moment, breaking the silence. "Get ready. We don't know what we'll find inside." "Why don't you just tell me what's going on?" I asked, frustration bubbling up inside me. "I'm not some pawn in your little game. I have a right to know what's happening." Jonathan's eyes briefly met mine before he sighed. "Your parents were part of a research program, one that went far beyond anything you can imagine. They were involved in a project that, if completed, could change everything. For better or worse, it's a power unlike anything the world has ever seen." I stared at him, my mind spinning. A power? My parents had always seemed like ordinary people. They had worked hard, loved me, protected me. What in the world could they have been mixed up in that would require this level of secrecy? "What do you mean, change everything?" I demanded. "What kind of power are you talking about?" Jonathan's gaze turned cold, and I felt a shiver creep down my spine. The kind of power that's not meant for just anyone. It's too dangerous, too volatile. Your parents knew this. That's why they tried to hide it. But now, someone else is trying to get their hands on it, and they'll do anything to get it, including using you. I felt a pang of panic shoot through my chest. Me? Why me? What could I possibly have to do with any of this? The project was incomplete. Your parents were part of the final stages, but they couldn't finish it without a key. And you're the key, Chloe. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My stomach lurched, and I suddenly felt dizzy. I'm the key? What did that even mean? Was I just a tool in this dangerous game? Why didn't they tell me? I whispered, more to myself than to Jonathan. Why didn't they trust me with this? Jonathan's face softened slightly. They wanted to protect you. They kept you in the dark for your own safety. They knew you weren't ready to handle this, not yet. I could feel the weight of his words press down on me, and I couldn't help but feel betrayed. My entire life had been a lie, a carefully constructed illusion, and now I was being dragged into something far darker than I could have ever imagined. My parents, my family, had been hiding something that could change the world. And now it was up to me to stop it. I didn't have a choice. The SUV began to slow as we approached the facility, its outline barely visible in the distance. The building stood alone, isolated, surrounded by high fences and guarded gates. It looked like a fortress, as if it had been designed to keep people out. Or perhaps to keep something in. Carter pulled the SUV into a small, hidden parking area a few hundred yards from the facility's entrance. The area was dark, cloaked in shadows, but the tension in the air was palpable. I could almost taste it, thick and suffocating. Jonathan turned to face me. We'll go in quietly. The fewer people who see us, the better. I'll take the lead. You stay close. This isn't going to be easy. I nodded, swallowing hard. I wasn't sure if I was ready for whatever we were about to face, but there was no turning back now. We got out of the car, and Carter led the way, his eyes scanning the area for any signs of movement. Jonathan followed close behind, and I hesitated for a moment before trailing after them. The cold air bit at my skin as we crept toward the facility, staying hidden in the shadows. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat loud enough to drown out all other sounds. My mind raced, 1,000 thoughts colliding at once. What was waiting for us inside? What was I supposed to do once we found whatever my parents had left behind? We reached a side entrance, and Jonathan quickly worked the lock, his fingers moving swiftly, efficiently. It clicked open, and the door creaked as it swung inward. We slipped inside, into the dimly lit hallway beyond. The facility was eerily quiet, the silence broken only by the distant hum of machinery. It felt cold, sterile, like a place designed to keep secrets. And from the look on Jonathan's face, I knew that this wasn't going to be easy. There was someone, waiting for us inside. We need to move quickly, Jonathan said, his voice low and urgent. The information we need is in the lab on the 3rd floor. But we're not alone in here. I swallowed hard, the weight of his words sinking in. We were being hunted, even here, in the very place where the answers lay. But I had no choice. The truth was in that lab, and I was the only one who could find it. We moved down the narrow hallway, our footsteps muffled against the cold floor. The further we went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The building felt alive, but not in a welcoming way. It felt like a trap, a place built to lure us in. And yet, I pressed on. The truth had to be out there, somewhere. The narrow hallways seemed to stretch endlessly in front of us, twisting and turning like some kind of labyrinth. The walls were lined with steel doors, all of them locked, all of them hiding their own secrets. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed and flickered occasionally, adding to the sterile, almost unnatural feeling of the place. Jonathan led the way with Carter close behind, both of them moving with a quiet efficiency that made it clear they'd been here before. My breath came out in shallow gasps, the adrenaline surging through me as I tried to keep up. Every step felt like a countdown, a race against time, and the closer we got to the lab, the more I could feel the weight of the mystery pressing down on me. Do you know what we're looking for? I whispered, my voice barely audible in the silence of the corridor. Jonathan didn't look back as he continued down the hallway, but his answer came just a beat too late, as if he'd been waiting to say it. The last piece of the project. Your parents were trying to finish it, but they couldn't. We need to find it before they do. It's the only thing that can stop everything from falling apart. Stop what? I asked, struggling to make sense of it all. What is this project? What does it even do? I'll explain when we're safe, Jonathan said shortly. Right now, we need to focus. We're getting close. I wanted to push him for more answers, to demand that he tell me everything, but I held back. There was no time for arguments now. We were in too deep, and there was no turning back. We reached the end of the hallway, where a set of elevators stood silently. The metallic doors gleamed under the harsh lights, and I couldn't help but feel a cold knot form in my stomach. Whatever waited for us up there, I wasn't ready for it. Jonathan punched a series of numbers into the keypad beside the elevator. The doors slid open with a soft hiss, and he stepped inside without hesitation. Carter and I followed, though I was acutely aware of how much I didn't belong here, how much I still didn't know. The elevator began its ascent, the walls of steel and glass reflecting our anxious expressions. The faint hum of the machinery below us was the only sound that filled the elevator. I pressed my hands to my sides, trying to steady my nerves. Once we get to the lab, Jonathan said, his voice low and tense, you stay close. There's no telling what we'll find in there. I nodded, but my mind was spinning. What if I'm not ready for this? What if everything I had been told was a lie, and I was walking straight into a trap? What if my parents didn't want to protect me? They were just trying to keep me out of the way. The elevator jolted to a stop, and I snapped out of my thoughts. The doors slid open with a quiet screech, revealing another sterile hallway. This one was different, though. There was a sense of urgency here, a feeling that we weren't supposed to be standing on this ground. Jonathan stepped out first, moving quickly but silently. Carter followed, and I hesitated for just a moment before stepping into the hallway. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I forced myself to take slow, steady breaths. The hallway was lined with even more security doors, but they weren't the same as the others. These were reinforced, built to withstand anything. This was where the most sensitive parts of the facility were housed. The deeper we went, the more isolated it felt. It was as though we were walking into a hidden world, a world that didn't want to be found. Here, Jonathan said, stopping in front of a heavy door at the end of the corridor. This is it. I looked at the door, my stomach twisting. This was where everything came together. Everything I'd learned, everything I'd feared. This was where I would find out what my parents had really been involved in and what my role in it was. Jonathan pulled a small keycard from his pocket and swiped it through the reader beside the door. The lock clicked, and the door creaked open slowly, revealing a dimly lit room beyond. The room was vast, filled with rows of high-tech equipment and machines that hummed with life. There were glass tanks along the far walls, and I couldn't help but glance inside at the strange, glowing substances suspended within. There were computers and monitors everywhere, each displaying lines of code, graphs, and figures that meant nothing to me. But it wasn't the machines that drew my attention. At the center of the room stood a large, cylindrical container. Inside it was a glowing object, bathed in an eerie light. I couldn't quite make out what it was, but I could feel its pull. It felt important. Too important. I took a step toward it, but Jonathan's hand shot out to stop me. Wait, he said sharply, his voice low. We don't know if it's secure. I froze, my fingers hovering just inches from the container. The glow from inside seemed to pulse with a rhythm, like it was alive. Do you know what it is? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jonathan's gaze flickered to the object, then back to me. His expression was hard to read, but I could see the worry in his eyes. It's the project. The final piece. The one your parents couldn't complete. I swallowed, my throat dry. But what does it do? Jonathan didn't answer. Instead, He reached into his bag and pulled out a small device, a tiny, black box with a glowing blue light. He held it up, and for a second, it felt like the entire room paused. "This is the key to unlocking it," he said softly. "It's the only way to stop it from falling into the wrong hands." Before I could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. I froze, my heart leaping into my throat. They were here. Jonathan quickly turned to Carter. "Get ready. We don't have much time." The door creaked, and the light flickered. The footsteps were getting closer. Whoever was coming for us, they were almost here. The footsteps grew louder, echoing through the facility like the approaching thunder of an inevitable storm. My heart was racing, every muscle in my body frozen in anticipation. Jonathan and Carter exchanged a quick look, the weight of the situation pressing down on them just as heavily as it was on me. "Hide it," Jonathan murmured to Carter. "We need to move fast." Carter nodded without a word, moving quickly to the side of the room, slipping behind a row of bulky equipment, his body blending into the shadows. Jonathan's eyes never left the door, his gaze hard and calculating. I stood there, paralyzed. Who were they? What did they want with us? The facility, with all its high-tech machinery and secrets, now felt like a tomb, a place where the answers to the questions I'd been asking for days were about to be buried once again. This time, however, I wasn't willing to let it happen. I glanced back at the glowing container in the center of the room. The object within seemed to pulse more urgently now, as if it sensed the danger approaching. It felt like a time bomb, just waiting to go off, its energy thick in the air. My parents had tried to keep it hidden, had gone to great lengths to protect me from whatever this was. But here it was, right in front of me, and with every passing second, the tension mounted. Whatever this object was, it wasn't meant to be left in the wrong hands. I swallowed, trying to steady my breath. "Jonathan, who are they?" "They're part of the group my parents warned me about. The ones who want to finish what your parents started," Jonathan said in a low voice, not taking his eyes off the door. "We don't know how much they know yet, but we need to be ready. If they get their hands on this," he stopped abruptly, the look on his face grim. "Are they part of the project?" I asked, feeling my pulse quicken. "Are they trying to complete it?" Jonathan nodded slowly. "They're the ones who want to use it for their own gain. They think it's the key to unlimited power, Chloe. They'll stop at nothing to get it." A cold shiver ran down my spine. Unlimited power? The project, the object, it wasn't just some experiment. It was a weapon. A weapon capable of changing everything. Suddenly, the door to the room swung open with a harsh, metallic screech. 3 figures stepped inside, their presence immediately filling the room. They were dressed in black tactical gear, faces obscured by masks. There was a chilling silence that followed their entrance, no words exchanged, no formalities. Just the sound of their boots on the floor and the weight of their intent. My breath caught in my throat. They were here. Jonathan and Carter were already moving. Carter's hands flew to his belt, pulling out a small device that instantly cast a bright light across the room. Jonathan, who had been standing motionless, suddenly lunged forward, grabbing the device from Carter's hand and turning it toward the approaching figures. A series of quick, sharp clicks echoed in the space as Jonathan and Carter positioned themselves between the object and the intruders, blocking the path with calculated precision. "Step away from the container," one of the intruders commanded in a low, clipped voice, his tone cold and detached. The other 2 flanked him, their eyes scanning the room, obviously trained to react to any sudden movements. "Not happening," Jonathan shot back, his voice tight with resolve. "This doesn't belong to you." The tension in the room was palpable, thick enough to slice through with a knife. My heart raced in my chest as I backed away slightly, trying to stay out of their line of sight, my eyes darting between Jonathan, Carter, and the masked figures. The glowing object was still pulsing, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was waiting for something or someone to trigger it. "Move aside," the leader of the group demanded again, his hand twitching toward the gun holstered at his side. "I'm not asking again," Jonathan replied, his voice low and steady. "You want it? You're going to have to go through us." The standoff was brief but intense, each second stretching on forever. My mind was racing. Should we fight? Should we run? Or should we give up the object and try to escape with our lives? But even as the thought flickered across my mind, I knew the answer. Giving up the object was not an option. Not now. Not after everything my parents had done to protect me. One of the masked figures moved forward suddenly, fast and decisive. His hand shot out to grab the container, and in the same motion, Jonathan reacted, knocking it away with a swift, fluid movement. A loud crash echoed through the room as the figure stumbled back, momentarily thrown off balance. "Get it together," the leader barked, signaling to his team. Before any of us could react, the other two intruders lunged forward, each of them pulling weapons from their belts, sleek, black rifles. They were too fast. Too well-trained. I could hear the click of safety mechanisms being removed, the sharp intake of breath from Carter as he prepared for the worst. And then it happened. The first gunshot rang out. Time seemed to slow. The sound of the shot was deafening, followed by a burst of heat that washed over me as the bullet flew past my ear. I ducked instinctively, the world around me becoming a blur. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear anything beyond the rapid beat in my chest. Jonathan moved first. He reached into his bag, pulling out another device, this one small and sleek. A flash of light filled the room, and the intruders were momentarily disoriented, their movements slowed as the light hit them. "Move," Jonathan shouted to me, and I didn't need to be told twice. I bolted forward, my feet pounding against the cold floor as I ran for cover behind one of the massive machines near the back of the room. My body was moving on pure instinct now, my heart racing in time with my steps. But even as I scrambled, I knew one thing. We were running out of time. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The intruders weren't backing down. They were getting closer, and the situation was getting more dangerous by the second. We had no choice but to fight back, and we had to do it fast. I ducked behind the machine, peering out just in time to see Jonathan and Carter engage with the masked figures. The gunshots rang out again, but Jonathan was faster, his movements sharp and precise. He took one of the intruders down with a quick, well-placed shot. But there were still two more. The tension in the room escalated, the air thick with the smell of gunpowder and the sound of chaos. The object, the glowing cylinder at the center of the room, seemed to pulse more violently now, almost like it was reacting to the conflict. My palms were slick with sweat, my mind racing. We had to finish this. We had to get the truth. Before it was too late. The sharp, staccato bursts of gunfire seemed to vibrate through the walls of the room. The air was thick with tension, and every moment felt like it was dragging us closer to the point of no return. I pressed myself further behind the machinery, the cold steel of it against my back offering little comfort as the sounds of the struggle filled the space around me. Jonathan's voice cut through the noise. "Carter, flank left. I'll keep them distracted." Carter responded with a quick grunt, his footsteps muffled as he moved around the perimeter of the room. I could hear him positioning himself, no doubt preparing to engage from a different angle. Jonathan, meanwhile, was doing everything in his power to keep the two remaining intruders at bay. His movements were quick and calculated, each one aimed at disorienting them long enough for Carter to make his move. I could barely make out their silhouettes against the dim light, but I could tell one of the intruders was closing in on Jonathan. My heart clenched as I watched him move into range. There wasn't enough time to warn him. Without thinking, I sprang into action. I grabbed the nearest object I could find, an old metal rod, likely a piece of discarded equipment, and raced toward the combatants. My pulse was thundering in my ears, and adrenaline was pumping through my veins, turning my limbs into iron as I swung the rod with everything I had. The metal collided with the intruder's back with a sickening thud, knocking him off balance. He grunted, stumbling forward, and Jonathan took that as his cue. He pivoted, delivering a quick but powerful blow to the man's chest. The intruder collapsed to the floor, unconscious, while Jonathan turned to face the other one. "Nice hit," Jonathan said breathlessly, his eyes flashing with a mixture of relief and focus. I barely registered his words, my gaze locked on the other intruder now moving toward me. He was tall and muscular, his face obscured by a mask, but there was something familiar about the way he moved. Something unnerving. Where had I seen him before? Before I could process the thought, he lunged at me, grabbing my arm in a vice-like grip. His fingers dug into my skin as he twisted my wrist, forcing me to release the metal rod. Panic surged through me, but I refused to back down. I kicked at his knee hard, but he barely flinched. He pulled me closer, and I could see the gleam of his weapon as he raised it toward me. It was a terrifyingly efficient motion, a move he had practiced countless times. In that moment, it was clear he had every intention of ending this. Ending me. Suddenly, a sharp noise like the crack of a whip cut through the tension. A beam of bright light flashed across the room, temporarily blinding the intruder. I took the opportunity to twist my body out of his grasp and duck behind a metal panel. Jonathan's voice rang out. "Chloe, get down." Without thinking, I dropped to the floor just as a series of shots whizzed overhead. The room erupted in chaos once again as Carter re-entered the fray, his weapon trained on the remaining intruder. The man staggered back, clearly caught off guard, as he tried to recalibrate and regain control of the situation. "Stay down," Carter shouted to me, his gun aimed steadily at the enemy. I didn't need to be told twice. I pressed myself against the floor, my hands covering my ears to drown out the deafening noise of the battle. My mind raced. This can't be happening. Not now. I needed answers. I needed to know what was going on, but right now, survival had to be the priority. Carter's voice was grim when he spoke again. "Jonathan, we've got to move now." "They're not alone." "What do you mean?" Jonathan asked, his voice tight as he glanced at the doorway. The intruder who had been knocked unconscious began to stir, groaning as he regained consciousness. I watched as he shakily reached for his weapon, his eyes darting toward the door. Jonathan swore under his breath. "They've got reinforcements. We don't have much time." My heart skipped a beat. Reinforcements? How many more were out there? "Where's the key?" Jonathan asked suddenly, his eyes snapping to mine. I blinked, confused. "Key?" "The device. The one you saw earlier, in the container. We need to take it with us or we're dead." I hesitated, the weight of his words sinking in. My gaze flicked toward the glowing object in the center of the room. The container seemed to be pulsing again, more erratically now, and the energy in the air felt charged, like it was about to detonate. The key. I remembered the small black box Jonathan had shown me earlier. It was the only way to deactivate whatever power lay dormant inside the object. Without it, we couldn't stop what was coming. "Right," I said, my voice shaky but resolute. "I'll grab it." But as I made my way toward the object, something unexpected happened. The door to the room burst open, and a new group of masked figures flooded in, their weapons raised and ready. The sound of their boots pounding on the floor was deafening, drowning out everything else. There were too many of them. Jonathan turned to face me, his eyes wide with panic. "Chloe, go. Take the device and get out of here. We'll hold them off." "What?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "No, we can't just leave you here." "We don't have a choice," Jonathan said quickly, his voice strained. "You need to get the truth out there. You need to stop this before it's too late." I opened my mouth to protest, but the words wouldn't come. I wanted to argue, to stay and fight, but deep down I knew he was right. This was bigger than any of us. If I didn't act now, everything would be lost. With a final glance toward Jonathan, I made my decision. I turned toward the glowing container, grabbed the device, and bolted for the door. The sound of the gunfire echoed in my ears as I ran, my heart pounding in my chest. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I wasn't leaving without the answers I so desperately needed. My breath came in ragged gasps as I sprinted through the dark corridors of the facility, the weight of the device heavy in my hands. The pulsating glow from the container I had grabbed still illuminated the hallway, casting erratic shadows on the walls as I moved. Every step I took felt like a countdown, the sound of my own heartbeat thundering in my ears, louder than anything else around me. I can't stop now. I won't stop. I had one mission: get out. I couldn't afford to look back, not even for a second. I'd seen enough to know that if I hesitated, if I allowed myself to get caught up in the chaos of what was happening inside that room, it would all be over. The hallway stretched ahead, dimly lit and eerily quiet, except for the faint sound of footsteps echoing in the distance. They were following me. The intruders weren't far behind. I had a head start, but it wouldn't be enough for long. I turned a corner, my feet pounding against the cold, unforgiving floor as I headed toward the back exit. My eyes scanned the area for any sign of an escape route, anything that could get me out of here. Think, Chloe. Think. I muttered to myself, my pulse racing. There had to be another way out. The back exit wasn't an option anymore. The facility had too many guards, too many ways to trap me. A flicker of movement caught my eye. I froze. There, just ahead of me, was a door slightly ajar. It wasn't the main exit, but it was something. It led to the underground tunnels, the ones my parents had mentioned in passing all those years ago. The tunnels were meant to be a secret, a hidden way out for emergencies. They were old, and no one had used them in years, but they were my best chance. I had no time to waste. With my heart in my throat, I dashed for the door. I pushed it open just enough to slip through, the dark tunnel beyond swallowing me up as I stepped inside. The air was damp and musty, and the silence was nearly suffocating. I hesitated for just a moment, listening for any sounds of pursuit, but I heard nothing. For the first time in what felt like hours, I allowed myself a breath of relief. I made it, but I knew better than to get comfortable. This was just the beginning. The tunnel was narrow, and the uneven ground beneath my feet made each step feel precarious. I moved quickly, though, my eyes adjusting to the darkness. I had no idea where this path would lead, but I couldn't afford to stop and think about it now. Every second was crucial. What is going on? What have I just gotten myself into? My mind was spinning, and I struggled to keep the fear from creeping up my spine. I thought about Jonathan and Carter. They were still back there, fighting for their lives. I couldn't shake the image of Jonathan's face, determined, yet strained with worry. He told me to escape, but that didn't mean I had to leave them behind. I could find another way to help. I just had to survive first. The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever, the air growing colder as I descended deeper into the facility's underbelly. The walls were rough and uneven, the floor slick with moisture. It was almost as if the passage had been forgotten by time itself. But then, ahead of me, a faint light appeared in the distance. My heart skipped a beat. Could it be? I pushed forward, my steps quickening. As I drew closer to the light, I realized it was coming from a small opening in the tunnel. It looked like the tunnel opened up into a larger space, a chamber, perhaps. The closer I got, the more certain I became that this was no coincidence. This was where the tunnel led, to something far bigger than I could have imagined. I paused just before the opening, listening intently. There was movement beyond, voices low but distinct. I crouched down instinctively, staying hidden in the shadows as I peered into the space beyond. What I saw took my breath away. The chamber was massive, filled with rows upon rows of high-tech equipment, far beyond what I had seen in the lab. It looked like an entire underground facility had been constructed right beneath the main building. And at the center of it all was a large, circular table, surrounded by a group of people, some familiar, others not. There was no mistaking it now. This was the heart of the operation. This was where everything was happening. I could see figures gathered around the table, speaking in low tones, their faces obscured by the shadows. But what struck me most was the figure standing at the head of the table. His presence was commanding, even from this distance. He was tall, with broad shoulders, and his posture exuded authority. Even though I couldn't see his face clearly, something about him was undeniably familiar. My breath caught in my throat. No, it couldn't be. But there he was, standing in the middle of it all. My father. He was alive. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Everything I had believed, everything I had thought was true, was now in question. My parents hadn't just disappeared. They had been a part of this. They had known about it, whatever it was, and they had been involved. I felt a chill run down my spine as I watched him interact with the other figures. My mind raced, trying to piece together what this meant. Why had they kept me in the dark for all these years? Why hadn't they told me? I had so many questions, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just a group of criminals trying to steal some high-tech secrets. This was a covert operation, a mission that spanned years, and I had unknowingly been caught in its web. As the figures around the table spoke in hushed voices, the answers I had been seeking all this time seemed to slip further out of my reach. The device I held in my hands was key to unlocking something much bigger. But what was it? I needed more information. I needed to know why my parents had left me, and why they hadn't told me any of this. But I couldn't do it alone. With a final glance at the darkened chamber, I made a decision. I couldn't just keep running. I had to confront this head-on, and the only way to do that was to gather more allies. I had to find Jonathan and Carter. I had to bring this to light before it was too late. I turned on my heel and sprinted back into the darkness, my thoughts swirling. I had uncovered a fraction of the truth, but I was far from finished. The race against time had only just begun. The sound of my footsteps echoed through the narrow, damp tunnel, but my mind was too overwhelmed with everything I'd just discovered to pay much attention to it. The revelation about my father, alive, orchestrating things from the shadows, and deeply involved in something far more sinister than I could have ever imagined, felt like a bomb had just gone off inside my head. The world I had once known, everything I had trusted, was crumbling away. As I sprinted back through the labyrinth of tunnels, my heart raced, pounding so loudly that I could barely hear anything else. The figure of my father standing at the head of that table, surrounded by unknown faces, his calm authority, it haunted me. There was so much I needed to understand, but I couldn't afford to stop. Not yet. The device I was carrying was the key to something huge, something dangerous. But what was it? And why had my parents kept me in the dark for all these years? There were so many unanswered questions swirling in my mind, and I had no answers. All I knew was that I had to find Jonathan and Carter, and fast. They were the only people I could trust now, and I had to warn them. The truth about the operation I had stumbled into was more than I could handle alone. I reached the end of the tunnel and pushed open the door leading into the main part of the facility. The sound of gunfire from earlier had faded, but there was no mistaking that something was still happening. I moved cautiously, keeping low, my every sense heightened as I crept toward the main hallway. It was eerily quiet. Too quiet. I paused just around the corner, listening intently. There was no sound of combat, no signs of anyone pursuing me, but something felt off. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The facility seemed deserted, but I knew better than to trust appearances. Just as I was about to take a step forward, a voice suddenly cut through the silence. "Chloe!" I froze. The voice was calm, collected, but there was an edge to it. I turned slowly, my heart skipping a beat as I saw who was standing in the doorway. Jonathan. His clothes were disheveled, his face smeared with dirt and blood, but there was a fierce intensity in his eyes that made my breath catch. He was alive. He was okay. But there was something different about the way he looked at me now, something guarded. "Jonathan," I whispered, relief flooding through me. I thought you were dead?" He finished the sentence for me, his lips curling into a wry smile. But it didn't reach his eyes. I'm not that easy to get rid of. I took a tentative step toward him, but something in the way he was standing made me hesitate. He wasn't the Jonathan I had known before. His usual calm demeanor had been replaced with something colder, more distant. His posture was tense, as if every part of him was on alert. "What's going on, Jonathan?" I asked, my voice cracking slightly as I took in his appearance. "What happened? Where's Carter?" "Where?" "He's fine," Jonathan interrupted, his voice sharp. "But there's no time to explain. We need to go. Now." I frowned. "But I have to tell you something. Something important." Later, Jonathan said, cutting me off again. His expression hardened. "There's no time. They're going to be looking for us soon." I didn't understand. "Who?" Jonathan's gaze flicked over his shoulder, his eyes scanning the hallway before he stepped closer to me. "Those people you saw in the room. The ones with your father." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "My father." I shook my head, unable to wrap my mind around it. "What do you mean, those people?" "Jonathan, what's going on?" "Why?" "Chloe." His voice softened just a fraction, but there was a coldness beneath it. "I know this is hard to understand. But everything you thought you knew is wrong. Your father, he's not the man you remember. And neither am I." My pulse quickened. "What are you talking about? Do you trust me?" Jonathan asked, his gaze searching mine, as though he were trying to gauge my reaction. The question caught me off guard. Of course, I trusted him. Or at least I had. Up until now, I had believed in him completely. But the way he was acting, distant, almost like a stranger, it was making me question everything. "I do," I replied, though doubt clouded my voice. "But I need answers, Jonathan. Now. I need to know the truth." He hesitated, his eyes flicking nervously to the hallway behind us. "I promise I'll explain everything, but right now we need to move. Carter's waiting. We're not safe here." Before I could protest, Jonathan turned and motioned for me to follow him. With no other choice, I reluctantly fell into step behind him as we moved quickly down the hallway, the quiet tension of the moment hanging between us like a thick fog. As we rounded the corner, I spotted Carter standing in the shadows, his eyes flicking nervously from side to side. The moment he saw me, he relaxed slightly, though his expression remained grave. "Are you okay?" Carter asked, his voice low but filled with concern. "I'm fine," I replied, but my voice betrayed me, cracking under the weight of everything that had happened. "But I need answers. Now." Carter glanced at Jonathan, then back at me. He looked like he was weighing his options, as though he knew the truth was about to come spilling out. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he sighed. "We need to go," Carter said, his voice tight. "There's no time for explanations right now. But I'll tell you everything, I promise." Jonathan nodded in agreement. "You don't have to trust me completely yet, Chloe. But you have to trust us if we're going to make it out of here alive." I opened my mouth to argue, to demand the answers I so desperately needed, but the look in Jonathan's eyes stopped me. It wasn't just coldness anymore, it was something else, something darker. What was going on? And more importantly, who could I really trust? The weight of the situation pressed down on me like a 1,000-pound stone, and I could feel it in the air, the tension crackling between Jonathan, Carter, and me. The truth had barely started to reveal itself, and already I was drowning in the enormity of it all. My father's involvement, the underground facility, the device in my hand, everything was connected, but the threads were so tangled that I couldn't make sense of them. Not yet. We were moving quickly, navigating the dark hallways of the facility, our footsteps swift and deliberate, but I could tell we were all just biding our time. The silence between us felt suffocating, and I couldn't help but feel like an outsider, even with the people I had trusted most. Jonathan was ahead of me, his back stiff, his strides purposeful, but his silence was deafening. Carter kept glancing at me, his eyes filled with an emotion I couldn't quite read. Finally, unable to keep it in any longer, I broke the silence. "Why won't you just tell me what's going on?" I demanded, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and fear. "Why all the secrecy? Jonathan, I don't even know who you are anymore." Jonathan froze, and for the briefest moment, I thought I saw a flicker of pain in his eyes. But it was gone before I could be sure. He turned slowly, his face unreadable. "You're right," he said, his voice flat. "You don't know who I am." The words hit me like a slap in the face. I opened my mouth to argue, but he raised a hand to stop me. "Let me finish," he said, his voice low but firm. "I'm not the person you think I am, Chloe. And neither is Carter." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. The implications of what he was saying were too much to process. "What do you mean?" Jonathan's gaze hardened. "I wasn't just sent here to be your friend. And neither was Carter." My heart skipped a beat. "You mean you've been using me this whole time? All of it was a lie?" Carter stepped forward, his expression pained, as though he was caught in the middle of a battle he couldn't win. "It's not that simple." "It's exactly that simple," Jonathan cut in, his voice growing colder. "We weren't just looking for the device, Chloe. We were looking for you." The words sank into me like cold steel. My hands trembled, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. "Why?" I managed to ask, though my voice was barely a whisper. Jonathan's eyes softened for a moment, and I saw something there, a flicker of guilt, maybe regret, but then it was gone, replaced by something harder. "Because you're more important than you realize," he said, his voice like gravel. "You're the key to everything." I felt like the ground beneath me was crumbling away. The key? To what? What did any of this have to do with me? I wasn't some important player in whatever game they were involved in. I was just a normal person who had stumbled into a nightmare. Carter looked at me, his eyes pleading, as if he wanted to explain, but he couldn't find the words. I felt a sharp sting in my chest. The betrayal stung in ways I couldn't even begin to articulate. How could they have kept this from me? How could they have played me like this? I took a step back, my chest tightening as a flood of emotions hit me all at once. Anger, confusion, heartbreak. I couldn't think clearly. The truth was too much to process. I turned to Jonathan, my voice trembling. How long? How long have you known the truth?" Jonathan hesitated. For a moment, I saw something vulnerable in his eyes. But then, just like that, it vanished. He took a deep breath and spoke. "I've known since the beginning. Since we first met. I was assigned to keep an eye on you. To protect you. To make sure you didn't get too close to the truth. And Carter. Carter was supposed to help me." The words felt like a punch to the gut. I had trusted him. I had believed in him. And now, everything he had told me, everything he had ever done, none of it was real. I shook my head, refusing to believe it. "So, all of it was just a lie? From the beginning?" "No," Carter interjected, stepping closer to me, his voice softer, but still urgent. "It wasn't like that. It's complicated. Jonathan and I, we were part of a mission. But what we found out along the way, it changed everything." "Changed everything?" I repeated bitterly. "So what, now I'm supposed to just believe that everything we've been through together was for nothing? You were just using me? Both of you." Jonathan's expression faltered. I could see the weight of the guilt in his eyes, but it wasn't enough to erase the betrayal I felt. "It wasn't enough to make it okay." "It wasn't about you, Chloe," Jonathan said, his voice strained. "It was about the device. We were trying to find out what your parents were involved in. And you're part of that. You've always been part of it. We didn't expect to care about you. But we did. I did." The admission hung heavy in the air between us. My pulse raced, my mind reeling, trying to make sense of everything he had just said. "So you did care about me?" I asked, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "Then why didn't you tell me the truth? Why didn't you trust me?" Jonathan ran a hand through his hair, frustration and regret mixing in his expression. "Because I couldn't, Chloe. I couldn't risk it. If you knew the truth, you'd be in even more danger than you already are. We were trying to protect you, but it was never supposed to go this far. I felt a cold rush of anger surge through me, but it was mixed with something else, something deeper. Betrayal, confusion, and a fear I didn't want to face. I looked between Jonathan and Carter, seeing them both in a new light. Everything had changed. The people I had trusted, the people I thought I could count on, they weren't who I thought they were. And now, I didn't know where to go from here. I couldn't just walk away from this, but I also couldn't ignore the feeling that my life had been manipulated in ways I couldn't even begin to comprehend. Every choice I had made up until now had been shaped by someone else's hand. And I had no idea how to move forward. The cold air pressed against my skin as we moved through the dark corridors of the underground facility. The heavy silence between us weighed on my chest, and the uncertainty gnawed at my mind. My thoughts were a tangled mess, nothing felt real anymore. Jonathan, once the person I had trusted above all others, had just shattered every foundation I'd built my world on. And Carter, standing beside him, seemed as conflicted as I felt, torn between what they had been sent to do and the undeniable feelings that had developed between us over the past few weeks. But that didn't matter now. All that mattered was the truth. The truth about why I was here, why my father had been involved in this twisted mess, and why I had been brought into it without any warning. "Are we almost there?" I asked, my voice breaking the tense quiet. My throat felt dry, and I struggled to keep my composure. I had to know everything, no matter how much it hurt. I had no other choice. Jonathan didn't respond immediately, his gaze flicking toward Carter for a moment before he spoke. "We're close. But there's something you need to know first, Chloe. Something that might change everything you think you understand." I turned toward him, my heart racing. "What is it? What's going on?" Jonathan exhaled slowly, as though he were gathering his thoughts. "You think your father is the key to all of this, but you're wrong. Your father's involvement goes deeper than you could ever imagine. And the device, the one you've been holding onto, it's not just any technology. It's a weapon." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stopped walking, my feet rooted to the spot. "A weapon? What did he mean?" "A weapon," I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "What kind of weapon?" Jonathan didn't look at me, his gaze fixed ahead as he continued. "It's a piece of technology designed to control minds, to manipulate people, to turn them into pawns." My mind raced. This couldn't be real. It didn't make sense. "Control minds." Carter spoke up, his voice strained. "It's not just some weapon. It's a key to something much bigger. The people your father's been working with, they're trying to create an army. And you, Chloe, you're the only one who can stop them." I blinked, trying to process the magnitude of what they were saying. "But how can I stop them? I don't even understand what's happening." Jonathan's eyes finally met mine, and for the first time in what felt like forever, there was a flicker of something resembling vulnerability in his expression. "Because you're connected to it. The device, it's tied to you. You've been carrying it because it's yours. Your father was trying to protect you from the truth, but now I'm a part of it." I finished for him, my voice filled with disbelief. I had no idea how to wrap my mind around this, how to make sense of it all. "Exactly," Jonathan replied, his voice tinged with regret. "And the people who are after you, they'll stop at nothing to get their hands on it. On you." I felt a shiver run down my spine. The world I knew, the life I had lived up until now, it was all a lie. Everything had been a carefully constructed facade. I wasn't just an innocent bystander in all of this. I was part of something far darker than I could have imagined. The hallway ahead of us opened into a large, dimly lit room. A set of steel doors stood in front of us, and as Jonathan stepped forward, he motioned for me to follow. "This is it," he said quietly, almost reverently. "The truth." I hesitated before stepping forward, the weight of everything pressing on me. "What truth?" I asked, though I already feared I knew the answer. "This room," Jonathan said, "is where your father's plan started. This is where it all began. We reached the doors, and Jonathan swiped a card through a small reader beside them. The doors slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a high-tech control room. It was sterile, cold, filled with monitors and blinking lights. But it was what I saw in the center of the room that stopped me in my tracks. At the center of the room was a large, glass containment unit. Inside, floating in some sort of suspended state, was a figure. My heart skipped a beat as I recognized the person. It was my father. Or at least, it looked like him. His eyes were closed, his body suspended in some sort of liquid. Tubes and wires connected to his skin, and he seemed to be not alive, but not quite dead either. He was trapped in some kind of stasis, his face pale and lifeless. "No," I gasped, stepping back. "No, this can't be happening. What is this?" Jonathan stepped forward, his voice quieter now. "This is your father's true legacy. The man you thought you knew is gone. The person you see in there? That's just a shell. He's been kept alive for this long, but only by the people who want to control him. They want the technology he developed, and they need you to unlock it." I felt my knees go weak. My father wasn't dead, but he wasn't alive either. He was nothing but a puppet, a tool for those who would use him for their own gain. And now I was the key to unlocking whatever twisted plans they had for him. How could they do this? I whispered, my voice breaking. How could he let this happen? Jonathan's expression softened. He didn't. He tried to protect you from all of this. But the people who control him, they're the ones in charge now. And they won't stop until they get what they want. Carter stepped forward, his voice filled with urgency. "We have to go. Now. If they find out we're here, they'll kill us," Jonathan finished, his voice hard. "And they'll take the device. You." I stood there, my thoughts spinning, my heart heavy with grief and disbelief. My father, the man who had always been my hero, was no longer the person I had known. He was a prisoner in a twisted experiment, and I was the one who could end it all. But the price might be my own life. "Chloe," Carter said, his hand resting gently on my shoulder. "We don't have much time. We need to leave. Now." I turned to face him, my eyes meeting his. I didn't know what to do anymore. My world was upside down, and I didn't know who to trust. "Okay," I said, my voice shaking. "Okay, let's go." But even as I said it, I couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest part was still to come. The truth had shattered everything I knew about my past. And now I had to figure out how to face a future that seemed darker than I could have ever imagined. The air in the underground facility felt thick, oppressive, as if the walls were closing in around me. My heart raced as I moved quickly down the corridor, Jonathan and Carter close behind me. My mind was spinning, every step carrying me deeper into this nightmare. We had seen my father, or what was left of him, an empty shell, preserved in that glass container like some kind of grotesque science experiment. I couldn't reconcile the man I had known with the lifeless body floating in that tank. He was supposed to be my protector, I thought, my chest tightening as I fought to push back the overwhelming wave of grief. As we reached the corner, I could hear footsteps echoing down the hall. My instincts screamed at me to run, to get as far away from this place as possible. But I knew I couldn't just walk away. I had to do something. I had to find a way to stop whatever had been set into motion, and I had to do it quickly. "Chloe, we need to move." Carter's voice cut through the fog of my thoughts. His hand was on my arm, urging me forward, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end as I glanced over my shoulder. Jonathan, who had been unusually silent up until this point, suddenly spoke. "The exit's this way. We need to get you out of here. It's the only way you'll be safe." I turned to face him, my mind still reeling from the truth he had revealed. "Safe? From what? You just told me my father's been trapped here, used for some twisted experiment. You expect me to just run away from it all? I can't do that." Jonathan's face softened, but there was no warmth in his expression. "You don't understand. They'll kill you, Chloe. If they think you're a threat, they'll eliminate you before you even get the chance to stop them. This is bigger than your father. This is bigger than you or me. We're dealing with forces that. They're already ahead of us, Carter interrupted, his tone grim. And they'll stop at nothing to get what they want. If we don't move now, we won't make it out of here alive. I felt a chill run through me. This was it. There was no turning back. The choices before me felt impossible, each one more dangerous than the last. Could I trust Jonathan? Could I trust Carter? Had either of them been truthful with me? Or was I just another pawn in this game, being played by people I couldn't begin to understand? But I couldn't afford to doubt them right now. Not when my life was on the line. I nodded, barely able to find my voice. Okay, let's go. We moved quickly, turning down another hallway that led to a metal door marked with a series of codes and symbols. Jonathan punched in a sequence on a keypad, and the door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing an underground garage. A sleek, black vehicle waited near the far wall, its engine humming in the silence of the room. This is our only way out, Jonathan said, moving toward the vehicle. Get in. I followed him without hesitation, but a nagging feeling still lingered at the back of my mind. My eyes flicked back to Carter, who was still standing in the doorway, watching me closely. There was something in his expression, something unreadable, that made my stomach twist with unease. The moment I stepped inside the vehicle, Jonathan slammed the door shut behind me. I could feel the weight of his gaze on me, but I couldn't bring myself to look at him. Not now. Not with everything that had just been revealed. The vehicle roared to life, and Jonathan began to steer it down the narrow path leading out of the facility. As we made our way through the underground tunnels, I could hear the faint sound of alarms blaring in the distance. I could only assume that someone had discovered our escape. And yet, even in the midst of the chaos, I couldn't help but feel like I was walking into an even darker future. The vehicle sped through the tunnels, moving faster than I ever thought possible in such tight quarters. But my mind wasn't focused on the speed or the eerie, dimly lit walls passing by. No, my thoughts were consumed with what was to come. Jonathan, where are we going? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Where are you taking me? He didn't look at me, his hands firmly gripping the wheel. We're going to the safe house. It's the only place they won't find us. It's secure. And then what? I pushed, my voice shaky. What happens next? What are you going to do with me? For the first time since we'd started this journey together, Jonathan hesitated. His lips pressed into a thin line, and he didn't answer right away. Carter shifted uncomfortably in his seat, glancing between the two of us, but he didn't speak either. We'll figure it out, Jonathan finally said, his voice quieter, almost resigned. But you need to understand, Chloe, your father's work isn't the only thing they want. They're after you now. You have something they need. And if they get their hands on you, everything will be lost. I swallowed, the weight of his words hitting me like a hammer. They were right. I was in more danger than I'd ever been before. And the more I learned about this twisted world, the more I realized I was caught in the middle of something far beyond my control. Suddenly, the vehicle lurched to a stop. My heart skipped a beat, and I froze, my gaze darting around the garage. I could hear the faint hum of machinery in the distance, but there was something else, something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. We're not alone, Carter said quietly, his eyes scanning the dark shadows. Jonathan didn't say anything at first. He just looked at me with an expression that was equal parts determination and fear. He didn't want to say it, but I could see it in his eyes. We were running out of time. Then, without warning, the sound of footsteps echoed through the garage, growing louder and closer. Get down, Jonathan snapped. The door to the vehicle flew open, and I felt myself being dragged out of the car. Carter pushed me behind a pillar, and I barely managed to catch my breath before everything went dark. I gasped for air, my pulse racing as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. One moment, we were on the run, barely escaping the underground facility, and the next, we were caught in the middle of a trap I hadn't seen coming. The sharp sound of the vehicle's door slamming open echoed in the garage, and I barely registered Jonathan's harsh words telling me to get down before something, or someone, dragged me out of the safety of the car. My feet barely touched the ground before I was shoved into the shadows, my heart pounding in my chest. Carter stood close by, his hand gripping my arm tightly, pulling me behind one of the large support beams that held up the structure of the garage. The air around us was thick with tension, and I could hear the sound of footsteps approaching, quick, deliberate steps, as if whoever was coming knew exactly where to look. "Stay quiet," Carter murmured, his breath hot against my ear as he pushed me further into the shadows. I nodded, my mind spinning. The entire situation was unraveling faster than I could keep up with, and the more I tried to process what was happening, the more questions I had. How had they found us so quickly? And why now? We were supposed to be safe. I risked a glance over my shoulder, and that's when I saw them, a group of figures in dark tactical gear, their faces obscured by black masks. They moved with practiced precision, scanning the area methodically, their eyes sweeping over every inch of the garage as if we were already caught. The feeling of being hunted, of being prey, swept over me, and I couldn't shake the dread pooling in my stomach. "We need to go," Jonathan whispered urgently, his eyes scanning the group of approaching figures. "This way." I didn't need to be told twice. I scrambled to my feet, my breath coming in shallow gasps, and followed Jonathan as he led us toward a narrow corridor in the back of the garage. But before we could make it more than a few steps, one of the masked figures turned, and his eyes locked onto mine. My heart skipped a beat. "They know." The man raised his hand, signaling for the others to stop. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I turned and bolted, my legs carrying me faster than I thought possible as I followed Jonathan's lead. I could hear the pursuit behind us, but I couldn't afford to look back. The footsteps were growing louder, closer, and the fear gnawed at me with every step. My thoughts were a chaotic jumble, none of this felt real, and yet it was all too real. "Keep going," Jonathan shouted, his voice tinged with urgency. I pushed myself harder, my lungs burning as I rounded a corner and almost collided with the door to a stairwell. Jonathan quickly shoved it open, and we descended into the lower levels of the facility. The stairs felt like they went on forever, and with every step, I felt the weight of the situation pressing down on me. Finally, we reached the bottom, and Jonathan led us through a series of winding hallways. We were moving deeper into the complex, away from the sounds of pursuit, but the fear of being caught never left me. Every sound seemed amplified, every step a reminder that we weren't safe yet. As we came to another door, Jonathan paused and turned to face me. "We're not far now. We'll be safe here for a while." I glanced at him, feeling the knot in my stomach tighten. "How do you know? How do you know they won't follow us?" Jonathan's eyes darkened. "They'll follow. They're already onto us. But we need to buy some time. This place, there are things here that they don't know about yet." I didn't understand what he meant, but before I could ask more, Carter spoke up. "Is it just me, or does anyone else feel like we're walking into another trap?" His voice was low, his eyes flicking nervously between Jonathan and me. Jonathan's jaw clenched, his expression unreadable. "It's not a trap." "Not if we stick together." But something in his voice didn't sit right with me. It wasn't just the desperation in his tone, it was the way his eyes darted around, the way he seemed to be calculating every move, every word. I didn't know if I could trust him anymore. "Carter's right," I said, my voice firm despite the uncertainty bubbling inside of me. "I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe anywhere anymore." Jonathan stepped closer, his gaze intense. "Chloe, you have to trust me. We don't have a choice. The people after you, they'll stop at nothing to get to you. This is our best shot." I looked at him, my mind reeling with the weight of his words. I wanted to trust him, I really did, but something about the way he said it felt too rehearsed, too controlled. As if he was trying to convince me of something he wasn't entirely sure of himself. I could feel my doubt growing with every passing second. "Maybe we don't have to trust him," Carter said, stepping forward now, his eyes locking onto mine. Maybe we should trust ourselves. What if Jonathan's plan isn't the best one? What if we're walking right into another trap? I flinched at the implication, but I couldn't ignore the growing sense of unease I had about Jonathan. What if Carter was right? What if we were all being manipulated? Carter, I started, but he cut me off. No, listen to me, Chloe, Carter said, his voice urgent. If we go with Jonathan, we're walking straight into a storm we won't survive. I know this place. I know how they think. And I can tell you, we're not in control here. Not yet. The decision was suddenly too big, too dangerous. Could I trust Jonathan, the man who had been my protector in this twisted nightmare? Or did I have to trust Carter, the man whose own allegiances were unclear but whose instincts had so far proven sharp? I turned to Jonathan, my eyes searching his for some hint of the man I thought I knew. What if you're lying to me? What if you've been playing me all along? Jonathan's expression faltered for just a moment, and in that brief hesitation, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Fear. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. I'm not lying, he said, his voice low and almost pleading. I'm not, Chloe. But before I could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Not the footsteps of a single pursuer, but the unmistakable sound of a squad, a team closing in on us. Jonathan's eyes widened. They've found us. I didn't know what was real anymore, what was truth, and what was manipulation. But in that moment, one thing was clear. We were out of time. Run, Jonathan shouted, turning toward the nearest exit. Carter grabbed my arm, pulling me with him as we sprinted down the hall. There was no room for hesitation anymore. No time for second guessing. Whatever choice I had to make, it had to be made now. But in my gut, I knew the truth. We were all running from something much bigger than ourselves. And this time, there was no guarantee we would make it out alive. The cold air of the hallway sliced through me as we ran, my legs moving almost on autopilot. My heart pounded in my chest like a drumbeat, each thud reverberating in my ears as I tried to focus on the path ahead. Jonathan's urgency pushed us faster, but I kept glancing over my shoulder, heart hammering with every footstep that echoed through the darkened corridors. Carter had a firm grip on my wrist, pulling me along, his breath sharp and quick as we barreled through the maze of hallways. I had no idea where we were headed, none of it felt familiar anymore, and the building's layout had become a blur of dark corridors and looming doors. We have to split up, Jonathan's voice broke through the noise in my head, low but firm. They're getting too close. We won't make it if we stay together. My pulse quickened. What do you mean? Split up. Jonathan's face was hard, his jaw clenched as he turned back to face me. They know we're here, Chloe. If we stay in one group, they'll track us all. We can't outrun them. It's the only way. Carter shot a skeptical look at Jonathan, but he didn't say anything. I could feel the tension between them, and it unsettled me. Jonathan, you're not seriously asking us to go off on our own, are you? We stick together, or we don't survive. Carter finally spoke, his voice sharp, disbelief evident in his eyes. Jonathan's eyes flicked over to Carter, and for the first time since we'd started this mad dash, I saw something resembling regret. But there was no time to talk it through. No time for explanations. The sound of boots on the floor grew louder, and I could feel the danger creeping closer, closing in on us like a tightening noose. Listen to me. Jonathan's voice rose, desperate. I'm doing this for you, Chloe. You need to trust me. I know what's coming. You're not going to survive if you stay with me. Not unless you go alone. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Alone. The one thing I feared more than anything in the world right now. The thought of walking into the unknown, not knowing who to trust, of facing this nightmare without anyone by my side. I could feel the weight of it pressing on my chest. Why? Why can't we stay together? I demanded, forcing myself to meet his eyes. He didn't hesitate. Because they won't stop until they have you. And if we all stay in one group, they'll take us all down. We need to separate to increase the chances that at least one of us gets away. At least one of us can make it to the safe house. And you have to be the one to get there. My blood ran cold at his words. He wasn't just asking me to split up. He was asking me to run. To abandon him and Carter, and trust that I could do this on my own. The thought seemed impossible. I wanted to refuse, to argue, but the pressure of the moment made it clear that we didn't have time for a debate. Do it for your father, Jonathan added, his voice softer now, but still urgent. Do it for the people who need you. You're the key to stopping this. I swallowed hard. My father. The man I thought I knew, the man who had been taken from me in such a brutal way, had been trying to protect me all along. Had he known this was coming? The thought struck me like a wave, knocking the wind out of me. Carter, still holding my wrist, looked at me, his expression unreadable. You don't have to listen to him, Chloe. He's asking you to walk into something you don't fully understand. Don't let him send you into a trap. I met Carter's gaze, feeling the weight of his words sink in. But deep down, I knew Jonathan was right. The danger we were in was growing with every passing second. The people hunting us weren't just after a body. They were after something much more dangerous, and I had it. I was the key. I turned back to Jonathan, my breath catching in my throat. You're sure about this? That we should split up? Jonathan nodded once, his face hardening as he looked past me. It's the only way. Get to the safe house. The rest will follow. I could hear the urgency in his voice. It wasn't just about saving us. It was about something bigger, something that he hadn't fully explained yet, but which I knew had to be the answer to all of this madness. The sound of boots grew louder. The decision was made for me. I turned to Carter, my heart aching. I'll find you. I promise. Without another word, I broke away from them, my feet carrying me faster than I thought possible. The farther I ran, the more my mind raced. I had no plan, no clear idea of where I was going. Just the faint hope that if I kept moving, kept running, I might somehow outrun the chaos that was chasing me. I sprinted down another corridor, glancing over my shoulder just once to see Carter and Jonathan disappearing into the darkness. For a moment, I thought about calling out to them, asking them to wait. But there was no time. I turned a corner and saw a small, metallic door at the end of the hallway. It looked like an exit of some kind, and the faintest hint of light leaked out from beneath it. My heart pounded in my chest as I ran toward it. I grabbed the handle and yanked the door open, stepping into the cool night air. The building's exterior was now behind me, but I knew that wasn't the end. The real danger lay ahead, in whatever awaited me out there. I barely took a breath before the sound of footsteps reached my ears. A familiar voice, low and urgent, cut through the night. Chloe! I spun around, my heart in my throat. It was Carter. His face was shadowed in the dim light, but the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. What are you doing here? I whispered, my voice shaking. We don't have time to explain, Carter said urgently, his hand grabbing mine. Get in. It's our only shot. And just like that, everything I thought I understood flipped on its head. Jonathan had been right. There was no way to survive this if we didn't trust each other. But what if the trust one had placed in him had been misplaced all along? In that moment, I had no answers. Only the certainty that I was running from something far bigger than I could comprehend, and that I had to keep moving. The night air was thick with tension as Carter pulled me into a narrow alley, away from the building, his grip tight on my wrist. My heart was still racing from the sprint, my breath coming in shallow gasps as I tried to process what had just happened. Jonathan had sent me away, forcing me to run alone, but now I had Carter back by my side, against all odds. What was happening? What was the truth? Carter didn't say anything as we moved quickly through the dark streets. The city was eerily silent, the usual hum of traffic muted under the weight of the night's chaos. Every step felt like it brought me closer to some inevitable showdown, but I had no idea who my enemies truly were anymore, or if Carter was even the ally he seemed to be. I thought you were with him, I managed to whisper between breaths. Jonathan, he said I needed to go alone. Why are you here? Carter's jaw tightened. I wasn't going to leave you, Chloe. I won't let you make the same mistake I did. I stopped walking, pulling my arm out of his grasp, my eyes locking with his in the dim light of the alley. What do you mean by that? What mistake? Carter, you're not making any sense. He looked away briefly, a flicker of guilt crossing his face before he regained his composure. It's not what you think. Jonathan has been playing both sides from the beginning. You're not the only one he's been lying to. The words hit me like a slap to the face. My heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? He's been lying to me? What's going on, Carter? Carter exhaled slowly, his eyes scanning the shadows, as if waiting for someone to jump out of the dark and silence us. Look, I don't have all the answers, but I know this much: Jonathan's plan is flawed. He's been using you, Chloe. I've been watching him for weeks now, and every time I think I've got him figured out, he slips further into the shadows. The truth is, he's been working with them all along. They're the ones pulling the strings. I could barely breathe as the words sunk in. Betrayal. The word echoed in my mind, but I couldn't wrap my head around it. Jonathan, the man who had promised to protect me, who had stood by me through every step of this nightmare, had he really been using me? No, I whispered, shaking my head. That doesn't make sense. He wouldn't. He saved me. He's the reason I'm still alive. Carter's expression softened, but his voice remained urgent. Chloe, he's not who you think he is. He's not the hero in this story. You've been a pawn in his game from the start, and you don't even realize it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to refuse to believe him. But something in his voice, something raw and desperate, told me he wasn't lying. Every word he spoke chipped away at the trust one had in Jonathan. The man who had been my ally was now the very person I was supposed to fear. How do you know all this? I asked, my voice trembling. Carter hesitated, his gaze shifting to the dark street ahead of us. Because I've been with them. The people Jonathan has been working with, they're part of a bigger network. They know about you, Chloe. They've been planning this for a long time. My stomach lurched at the thought of it. The people who had been hunting me, who had destroyed everything I thought I knew, were they closer than I had realized? Had Jonathan been one of them all along? I stepped back, feeling the weight of everything I had learned crash down on me. So, what now? What do we do? Carter's eyes softened, his hand reaching out to steady me. We stop running. We fight. And we take back control of the narrative before it's too late. I nodded, my mind racing. But there was no time to think. There was no time to make a plan. The footsteps from earlier, those distant but unmistakable sounds, were getting closer again. They were tracking us. The people Jonathan had warned me about. The ones he had said would never stop coming for me were closing in. You're sure about this? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Carter's eyes were hard, resolute. I am. And I'll be with you no matter what happens. But we can't do this alone. In that moment, something clicked inside of me. The truth was like a fog lifting. Jonathan's betrayal was not just about him anymore. It was about me taking control of my own destiny. I wasn't just a pawn in this game. I had a part to play, and if Carter was right, it was time to make my move. I took a deep breath, gathering every ounce of strength I had left. Then let's do this. We moved quickly, slipping into the shadows once more, this time with a plan, to confront the truth and take down the people who had been manipulating me from the very beginning. It was no longer about survival. It was about revenge, about reclaiming what was rightfully mine. We reached an old, dilapidated warehouse, the kind of place that didn't look like it belonged in the middle of the city. The rusting metal doors creaked as we pushed them open, the air inside thick with dust and the scent of decay. The shadows seemed to swallow us whole as we stepped inside, but we didn't falter. We couldn't afford to. I know this place, Carter murmured, his eyes scanning the room. It's where they keep their secrets. We'll find what we need here. But as we moved deeper into the warehouse, I began to feel it, the unmistakable weight of being watched. Something was wrong. The air felt thicker, heavier. A cold shiver ran down my spine, and I froze, my eyes flicking toward a distant corner. And there, Standing in the shadows was Jonathan. The air in the warehouse was suffocating. Every step I took felt heavier, like the walls themselves were closing in on me. My mind spun as I stared at Jonathan, standing there in the shadows, as though waiting for me to process the unthinkable. Carter stood behind me, tense, his hand hovering near his side. It wasn't just the weight of the moment that made the air thick, it was the unspoken truth that hung between us all. Jonathan was the last person I thought I would have to face, and yet here we were. Chloe, Jonathan's voice broke through the silence, smooth, almost too calm, as if nothing had changed. He stepped forward, emerging from the shadows with the same cool expression he'd always had, the same confidence that had once made him feel like a protector. "I knew you'd find me eventually." I didn't know what to say. The words stuck in my throat like a bitter pill. Betrayal felt like a foreign concept at first, but now it tasted real, raw, and sharp. It wasn't just the fact that Jonathan had been playing me all along, it was the realization that everything I had believed in, everything that had kept me moving forward, had been based on a lie. "Why?" My voice cracked as I finally found the strength to speak. "Why didn't you just tell me the truth?" Jonathan's gaze softened, but his eyes were calculating, unreadable. "You wouldn't have understood. It wasn't the right time. You were never supposed to know this, Chloe. It was too dangerous." Carter stepped forward then, his jaw tight with anger. "Dangerous? You manipulated her, Jonathan. You played with her life like it was a game. We've all been pawns in your little scheme." Jonathan glanced briefly at Carter, his expression hardening. "You still don't understand. This was never about control. It was about survival, about making sure the plan worked. Chloe is the key to everything. The key to stopping them." "Them?" I asked, the realization dawning on me as I took a step back. "Who are they? What is this really about?" Jonathan's eyes flickered briefly, but he regained his composure quickly. "The organization. The ones pulling all the strings. They've been watching you, Chloe, long before you even knew they existed. The power, the information they want, it all leads back to you. Your father knew it, too. He tried to stop them, but it was too late. They'd already infiltrated everything." I felt the floor drop out from under me. My head spun as I pieced the fragments of the past together. The mysterious men who had been hunting me. The threats. The constant fear that had clung to me like a second skin. It wasn't just about survival, it was about something far more dangerous. They wanted me. But why me? I whispered, the question lingering in the air between us. "What's so special about me?" Jonathan's lips curled into a faint, almost regretful smile. "You have the answers they need, Chloe. Your father left you something that will give them everything they want. And that's why you've been hunted. That's why I had to protect you, even if it meant lying to you." I felt sick, the pieces of the puzzle finally clicking together, each one more horrifying than the last. My father had known all along. He tried to protect me, but it hadn't been enough. The truth was so much darker than I could have ever imagined. Carter's voice broke through the haze of my thoughts, harsh and raw. "You think you can protect her now? You've already betrayed her once, Jonathan. Why should she believe anything you say?" Jonathan's gaze locked with Carter's, a flicker of annoyance crossing his features. "Because you're still thinking in terms of right and wrong. This isn't about good and evil, Carter. It's about survival. And Chloe," he turned back to me, his voice softening, "you have a choice to make. This isn't a game anymore. The world you knew is gone. You can't go back to it. But you can take control of what happens next. If you want to survive, you'll have to be stronger than you've ever been." The weight of his words hung heavy in the air. It felt like the ground beneath me had split open, and I was standing at the edge of a cliff with nothing but a storm of choices before me. What was I supposed to do? Could I trust Jonathan now after everything? Could I trust Carter, who had always seemed to be my only constant? They were both right. I couldn't go back. But where would that leave me? And what about the plan? What about the people hunting me, the organization that had been pulling the strings from the beginning? I could see it all now, the web of lies, deceit, and manipulation. Jonathan was offering me a way out. A chance to take back control. But at what cost? Chloe, Jonathan said again, his voice steady, you need to decide. Stay with me, and we finish what your father started. We can stop them, for good. I looked at Carter, my mind racing. His face was set in grim determination, but there was a softness there too, like he wanted to protect me, wanted to save me from whatever Jonathan was suggesting. But could I afford to take that risk? Jonathan, I began, but my voice faltered as I tried to find the words. I don't know if I can trust you anymore. How do I know you're telling me the truth? Jonathan's expression didn't change, but there was a brief flicker of something deeper in his eyes. Something almost vulnerable. You don't. But you'll have to. There's no other choice, Chloe. If you don't, they'll come for you, and for everyone you love. I took a deep breath. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the future. About the people I cared for. About the world my father had tried to protect. And so, standing in that dimly lit warehouse, I made my choice. I wasn't just going to survive. I was going to fight. I'll do it, I said, my voice strong. But we do this my way. No more lies. Jonathan's eyes flickered with something like approval. Carter, though, looked torn. Chloe, no. But I was done listening to the doubts. It was time to take control. Time to end this once and for all. We walked forward together, Jonathan at my side, Carter reluctantly following. Whatever came next, I was ready. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?